Being the appointed time of 5:30,
Oh, go ahead.
I call,
Do you have the microphones on?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
is there,
Yes, thank you.
you're welcome. I call the meeting to order. All right, can we please have a roll call?
Certainly. Dr. Ruth Cox,
Present?
Trip York,
Here.
James Bisbee,
Here.
John Blackholder. Here. Peggy Broadway,
Here.
Tony Bryant,
Here.
Annette Stone,
Yes, here.
Candace Sullivan,
Present.
and Ellen Sheridan is excused.
Okay. Can I call for a motion related to the two sets of minutes that we have before us? So we have the minutes from the September 15th meeting, and we have the minutes from the October 6th minutes. Can I call for a motion to dispense from the reading of the minutes?
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
All of those in favor?
Aye.
All of those against? Hearing none, we will dispense with the reading of the minutes. Okay. Let me start with talking about the hearing and how we...
Madam Chair.
Do what?
You need a motion to approve or adopt the minutes.
Okay,
You
sorry.
may want to ask if there are any adjustments to the minutes.
Okay. Are there any adjustments to either one of these two minutes? Hearing none. Can we approve these together, or do we need to approve each one of them individually?
You can do
We
them
do it
together.
together?
There's no recommendation for changes.
We can do it together?
Yes, we do.
So we will do them together. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes? As,
I make a motion. So moved.
Second.
there's a second. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All of those opposed, hearing none, these two sets of minutes are approved. Okay? So, let me talk about what the commission is and how we will proceed. The Historic Preservation Commission is a public commission appointed by the City of New Bern's Board of Aldermen. It is responsible for preserving and safeguarding New Bern's locally designated historic districts, downtown, and Riverside, based on U.S. Department of Interior standards, state statutes, city ordinances, and New Bern's historic guidelines. Two of the major tasks of the HPC include approving applications for certificate of appropriateness and preventing demolition of historic structures due to neglect. The HPC holds a quasi-judicial hearing on an application for a certificate of appropriateness. The Commission hears sworn testimony and evidence provided by the applicant, by parties who receive notice of the hearing, and by others who can justify that they have relevant evidence and are directly affected by the application. The Commission cannot consider comments based on personal likes or dislikes, hearsay, or personal opinion that cannot be directly related to specific historic guidelines. Likewise, commissioners shall refrain from stating personal opinion, personal likes or dislikes, or hearsay during a hearing. The Commission's decision on an application is based solely on testimony and evidence presented at the hearing that directly relates to the historic guidelines. Those of you who may want to participate in our meeting tonight, if you will come up and be sworn in.
Okay, raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth to the best of your knowledge? I do. Okay, if you haven't already signed in, please sign in. Okay, they've already all signed in.
They've all signed in. Okay, we will proceed as follows. The HPC administrator provides an overview of the application. The applicant or their representative presents the application. Proponents and opponents who receive notice of the hearing can present evidence. Rebuttal is allowed by the applicant and by proponents and opponents who receive notice. Others who can justify that they have relevant information and will be directly affected can present evidence. The HPC administrator presents the staff's findings and recommendations. The applicant or their representative has an opportunity to make final comments if they desire. The commissioners discuss the evidence and may ask for clarification from the applicant or their representative. The chairman calls for a motion to approve or deny the application with stated finding of fact. The motion is discussed by the commission. The chairman calls for a vote on the motion by the commission. A COA can be approved with conditions, or denied. So let us go to the first application on our set of minutes for this evening, and that is 715 East Front Street.
Okay.
So if you want to give us an overview.
Do you want to ask about conflicts?
Yes. Are there any conflicts of interest for this first item, 715 East Front Street? Does anybody need to recuse themselves?
I do.
You need to? Okay. All right.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Okay. All right. So all of those in favor of her recusing herself?
Wait, we need a motion and a second.
Yeah. So, well, I got ahead. So can we have a motion for her to recuse herself?
So moved.
Have a second? Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, so if you want to take a seat out there for this discussion, you have to go this way. Okay. So, sir, would you like to tell us about this first application?
Yes, certainly. So this is the beginning of the application here for 715 East Front Street. Property owner is Rosalie McDevitt, and the applicant's name is Go Architectural Design PLLC. Sarah Offenbach is the owner's authorized representative. The application is for the demolition of an existing structure to accommodate a new house, and they've referenced the demolition sections, and also that materials are not applicable. So that application is signed by Sarah Offenbach and dated, and this is the Certificate of Appropriateness Owner's Authorization Form, signed and dated and notarized. And so now, go to a review of the site plan. So this is the site indicated here inside the blue line. The East Front Street is at the top of the drawing. And it actually shows two houses inside the blue line. The parcel is actually the left half of this. It's a separate parcel. The two parcels were owned by the same owner at one point, so that's probably why these are inside one rectangle. But it's just the left half. So you see the left half has, in the lower left corner, has the subject building. And then also a large open space in front of it up to the dashed-in area, and including the dashed-in area, which is just an old driveway that was there. And so essentially you would ignore the right half of this rectangular area. I guess two things to note here are the dimensions to the property lines. In the lower left corner again, I'm not sure if you can read that, and at the risk of losing it. 13.6 feet to the building at its closest to the property line on the side, and 14 feet to a tiny little projection on the back to the rear property line. The building is located about, or is dimensioned to show 101 feet to the front property line. All right. Next page. Oops. Okay, so the applicant also includes a prospective purchaser of the property. They have, it's under contract, I believe, and so his name is George Aiken. He's also a professional structural engineer, and so he's provided for himself an assessment of the structure. I'm not going to read all that. However, he does reference, you can see in the bold there, he does reference all the figures, 1 through 30, and he also does answer many of the questions that are required as part of the process, which I can go ahead and go through. For evaluating contributing structure for demolition, there's these 1, 2, 3. This one is the HPC is to determine the structure qualifies as a contributing structure in a locally designated historic district and it is 50 years or older or not. 2, the State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO, has determined whether the structure has statewide significance or not. And 3, SHPO has evaluated the interior and exterior of the structure and provided a written evaluation and opinion on the architectural, historical, and cultural significance of the structure. So with regard to number 1, that will be one thing for you to determine. Number 2 and 3, the SHPO office has provided us several emails to address those as well. And then continuing on, other considerations that the HPC is to use for evaluation regarding a demolition. Considerations, you can see 1, 2, and 3 here. So consideration 1 is 3 bullets. Is it a contributing structure? The applicant says yes, although given the existing condition of the structure, it is not considered viable by the HPC guidelines definitions, which has it listed as feasible, workable, and practical. 2, is it significant because of its historic use, an event, a person, a builder, or an architect? The applicant has replied, no, it is not believed that the house is associated with any historic event, person, builder, or architect. And 3rd bullet, is it the last or oldest example of a certain building type? They've answered, no, I guess it is believed that there are numerous 1950s vintage structures in the area. It is unknown if this type of architecture is scarce or unique. Consideration 2 is to address the integrity of the structure. So there are 2 bullets here. What are the conditions of foundations, floors, walls, windows, doors, and roofs? The existing structure is a single-story concrete masonry unit shell that is dilapidated and uninhabitable. There is no roof, no windows, no electricity, no plumbing, no heating, and air conditioning, nor kitchen. The interior floor joists, floor sheathing, and a few remaining ceiling joists have been exposed to the weather for 3 years and are deteriorated and unstable. 2nd bullet, is it a hazard to public health, safety, and welfare? The applicants replied, the remaining ceiling joists, floor joists, and floor sheathing have been exposed to the elements 3 years and are deteriorated and unstable. And then consideration 3 bullets here. Have options for rehabilitation been explored with preservation organizations? So I'll just summarize this. Essentially, they said that due to the unviability of remodeling the structure, it seemed to not be a viable option to even contact the various preservation organizations. 2nd bullet, has the applicant been unsuccessful in seeking alternatives to demolition? The answer, the property owner has explored the 2 options described above. The proposed property owner has explored repurposing the structure, but no options are viable. And the 3rd bullet, have alternatives for structure relocation and sale of the property been pursued? Their answer is similar to lifting or raising the structure, underpinning and moving a CMU, concrete masonry unit structure, is prohibitively expensive and beyond the scope of a residential application. And then, so now is the structural engineering report. While it's not required, they have done so anyway. giving a report on the roof and ceiling, the interior walls, the windows, exterior doors, the floor, the exterior foundations and walls. And then also a detailed description and justification for each structural component of whether the component is 50% or more structurally unsound. Again, roof and ceiling, interior walls, windows, floors, exterior door, and exterior walls and foundations. So, and in his opinion, the only part of the in situ structure that could possibly be repurposed is the exterior CMU walls, essentially the shell. These walls appear to be in serviceable condition, but strengthening of lintels or spanning of the openings prior to placing loading would be prudent. It's believed that the wall is not reinforced either vertically or horizontally, since this was not common in residential construction. Protecting the existing CMU wall would be extremely difficult, and demolition and reconstruction would be painstakingly done by hand and immensely expensive. Much difficulty could be anticipated in demolishing the existing wood floor, subfloor, joist, and beams and piers. Placing any new concrete or wood floor would also be extremely time-consuming and require diligent care to be taken to protect the CMU walls. Moreover, any new construction on the 70-year-old CMU units would have to be made compliant with existing building codes. It would be especially challenging to meet the modern building code for high wind and roof tie-down. Each of these factors speak to the viability, feasibility, workability, practicality of any scheme to repurpose the walls. All right, and so they've provided 30 different photographs of the property and the structure. So this being a good overview, showing the structure in its current situation. The entire roof is gone, half of the ceiling joists are gone, and we'll see more details. All the windows are not in place, although I understand in storage. And then again from the other angle, from the back, and now from directly above. And now now a whole series of interior photographs showing the condition of the structure. I think the pictures speak 1,000 words. I don't need to say too much. This showing one of the few shots showing the piece of the floor removed or missing, and the shallow nature of the crawl space underneath. So, okay, now we have different size photographs. There we go. This is also at that opening, or one of the openings to the crawl space, and showing this floor structure and the floor surface, plywood. So this must be from inside the addition on the back, through the doorway into the main house, showing the front doorway from the inside. And then vice versa, from the doorway, it seems, back to the doorway at the addition on the back. And again, just a little bit more to the left, that's that same doorway. And then again, now here is the crawl space, a little bit at an angle, so you may have to twist your head a little bit to the left. But the ground is, 6 to 10, 12 inches below the joists. Now here, again, and cross bracing, that's just cross bracing that's falling down there. Oh, I guess the concrete blocks are 8 inches high, so it may be 16 inches of crawl space there. And they've also marked many of the cracks that are in the existing wall with the red paint, or I guess maybe a drawing on the drawing, I'm not sure. And there you can see a crack over the lintel on the front window. And another one over another lintel. Well, concrete, yes, at a lintel. There's actually a steel lintel behind here. If you can maybe see, there's a small area here because that steel lintel then holds up these individual concrete blocks here. And there's another lintel with more cracks. This is a hairline crack next to the one windowsill. No, that's not the same one. So another one with a similar pattern. And another one with another similar pattern. So these are all right at the windowsills, that kind of zigzag there. And then this continues down below the windowsill. And another one over a lintel. There's one at the top of the wall. Another end of the lintel. Hey, this one doesn't have any. The front door. Okay, and now the site plan showing a potential proposed redevelopment of the property and the relationship of the existing building to that redevelopment. So, I want to get this quite a bit larger. Okay, so we'll start at least with a little bit of an overview here. Again, the street, East Front Street at the top. And they're proposing with this blue shape here a new home. And then they're also proposing that they would then, after demolition, they would add a garage in the back. And what they're showing here is that the curve radius required for a vehicle to enter a garage actually requires a distance from the side property line to the garage door that is larger than the amount of space that's available currently with the existing building. So to consider converting the existing building into a garage isn't possible because there isn't enough space for a car to turn in the side of the structure. The bigger picture, let me just enlarge it a little bit in case you couldn't see before. You see the blue square here would be the new garage, and they also show the setbacks required for a new house and a new garage. Actually, the garage could actually move back 2 more feet for a 3-foot setback. All right, the next one is an example of a house that would fit on the property in that footprint. This is just one that was pulled off the internet, but just to show that it is, at this point, not impossible, because that house has a dimension of, where was the dimension on this? Did we lose that page? Oh, no? I think, did you guys remove the page with the dimensions?
The site plan has it.
Okay.
I think it was 35.
Yes,
And,
or 34 even.
About 30.
Yeah.
37.
So it doesn't have dimensions on here, but this is a 2-scale rendition of that floor plan, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. So you can see the point being that there is still space on the north side of the structure to get a car enough space to drive by before, without crossing the property line. All right. And then, this was now one of the first of 3 emails from the SHPO regarding the 2 requirements in our policy procedures for demolitions. So the first of the two is that SHPO has to determine whether the structure has statewide significance. And secondly, SHPO has evaluated the interior and exterior of the structure and provided a written evaluation and opinion on the architectural, historical, and cultural significance of the structure. So first, there were two emails about the first item, and quite clearly, he says that this property does not rise to a level of being of statewide significance. And then when I asked him to reply about the second one, he continued about the first one. So I think there was a misunderstanding, so we'll just skip that one. And then finally, I was able to get him to respond to the second one, and he has these 6 bullet items, basically, that describe why this house would have been considered or is considered to be contributing in the historic district. So first of all, the first one is that first of all it has to be in the district, which it is. Also that the house was built within the historic district's period of significance, which was up to 1953. And this house was built in approximately 1950. At the time of the survey, which is what the term is for when they review the house back in 2002 or 3, the house retained historic integrity. The house is part of the historic streetscape of the northern end of East Front Street. Fifthly, the house is representative of National Register Criterion A in the area of community development. Under Criterion A, the house is an example of the post-World War II housing that was constructed in New Bern in the decade following the war. It is part of the continued development or redevelopment of the northern end of East Front Street, where older residential and light industrial structures were demolished and the lots rebuilt upon. It also may indicate one family's means of creating additional income through rental property, as they also constructed 2 houses on the adjacent lot at 711 East Front Street. That was the right-hand half of that blue rectangle at the very beginning. So lastly, the house is representative of National Register Criterion C for architecture as an example of the simple, modest house styles and forms being constructed in New Bern in the decade following the Second World War. Construction materials represent the popular materials and methods in use during the period. The style, form, and materials may also be indicative of the function/occupants of the house, such as rental housing for tenant occupancy. And I forgot to mention in the first paragraph, the second sentence says, for the most part, if a property falls within the district's period of significance, retains historic integrity, and is representative of one of the National Register criteria for which the district is being nominated, then it would be considered to be contributing to the historic district. He then went on to say that if you need any more information or help on this significance, he recommends that we engage a consultant for that. And while it appears that the HPC has enough information to render a decision, the more information that they have, the better the decision will be. I'll leave it up to you and them to decide, them meaning you, to decide if they require additional information. And he's attached a list of such consultants. All right. Then one more piece of outside information is the procedures and the manual also require that the HPC members visit the site, and if the structure is unsafe, that the chief building inspector provide information about the structure so that you all don't have to go inside and do that. So he has done that. He recently visited the property to assess the viability of renovating the existing residential structure to meet all applicable building codes, while also complying with the city's flood damage prevention ordinance. And I'm just going to read the next few paragraphs because I believe we all received this just today, so you may not have had the opportunity to read it yourselves yet. All framing members that have been exposed to the elements will need to be removed and replaced. All electrical, plumbing, and mechanical systems are also inoperable and would need to be fully removed and replaced. It appears that the only portion of the structure that is salvageable are the unreinforced, uninsulated block walls. Raising the finished floor elevation to above the current FEMA flood levels would be impractical and cost prohibitive. Attempting to successfully elevate the entire masonry shell would surely lead to additional cracking and damages. That's Matt Boswell, the Chief Building Inspector. Okay, lastly, before our recommendations, we have the zoning and inspections review, and the zoning officer said that a demolition is not applicable for zoning, and that the Chief Building Inspector did say that a demolition permit would be required. So other than that,
Does the applicant or the representative wish to add anything to what's already been presented?
Sarah Appleback, just want to say a couple words. I know that you all are all very familiar with this project and have seen it come through several times in attempt to raise it, and here we are at this stage where we think that the most viable option for this lot really is to take it down. And you know, what Matt Boswell said at the very end is really how we see the property, in that it's a shell. It's not really representative of the historic character that it once had, and in having to raise it to make it a viable property takes away that character and makes it really cost prohibitive. And I know cost is not a concern for you, but to me it goes towards the viability of the project itself. So just wanted to say those words. Thank you.
So do we have any notified proponents in our audience? Okay. So sir, if you would like to come up and give us your name and where you live. So you got a letter about this house. You received a letter?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So if you give us your name and where you live.
And I live at 717 East Front Street, which is next door to the property.
Okay.
And everything I've heard tonight indicates that the existing remaining part of the structure can't really be rebuilt because of all these cracks and deterioration of everything that has been exposed for 2 or 3 years to the elements.
Yes, sir.
So basically, you would be trying to build a new building where this building or what remains of it exists. And somehow, I can't imagine how that would meet the criteria of being a contributing structure when the whole thing would have to be rebuilt. The other big thing that concerns me is that living on East Front Street and looking at everything that's there and everything that will be there when River Station is finished, it's quite a resurgence to that end of East Front Street. We built our new house 2 years ago. The Garners built a new house across the street 5 or 6 years ago. There's an empty lot next to the Garners that people are proposing to build a nice new home on.
can I ask you to speak up a little bit more? There's a lot of background noise.
Okay. I'm just saying that I see quite a resurgence in that end of East Front Street in the
Yes,
last
sir.
number of years.
Yeah.
And now with River Station being built up, that adds to it even more. There's one other vacant lot across the street next to the Garner home that's going to be built on with a nice new home. This lot needs to have a home on it because I think that represents the progress in New Bern, the city, East Front Street, which is already a beautiful street. I just can't imagine that this is a good idea to rebuild something that doesn't fit into today's world at all. I understand that it's recognized as a historic facility, but what was a historic facility is now just a cement block shell. So I ask you to consider all that and not let my worst nightmare come true.
Okay. All right, thank you for coming tonight, sir, and sharing your thoughts with us. Are there any notified opponent? Okay, there's somebody else, okay, another proponent. So if you give your name and you received a letter, okay, and where you live in relationship to this structure.
Hi, my name is Corinne Kaur. I own the lot at 719 East Front Street on the other side of this gentleman. I live in Skysail. This house was a victim of Florence. I'll be short. The house does not represent much of anything in the state that it's in. It's a shell. It doesn't have a roof. It doesn't have windows. It's not much of a floor plan. It's kind of a mass of rubble and an eyesore. Stating that it represents a period of our history today is no longer true, and I am for the proposed new plans for the lot. So that's all.
Okay, thank you for coming tonight to share your thoughts with us. So is there any more proponents? Okay?
George would like to say something. He was going to say something after I got back with the move forward.
Well, but you didn't receive a letter or anything.
He's the applicant.
You're part of the application, okay? So you could speak later when you have an opportunity to have a rebuttal. Okay, because you're not in this group. If you didn't get a letter and you don't live in 100 feet, you're not in this group. Okay. So no more proponents out there. We don't have very many people. Are there any notified opponents? Seeing none. So the applicant can make a rebuttal now if you want to say anything now about what's been said at this point.
Madam Chair, just as a point of clarity, it's my understanding that the property is under contract, so this gentleman is not an applicant. However, the chair in her discretion can allow this gentleman to speak if you think that information would be important to your deliberations.
Okay, so if he doesn't speak now, this is the only time that he would have to speak.
Well, there is the section on others with evidence, as opposed to rebuttal. Same thing, but just a point of,
So does it make any difference whether he speaks now or later?
I think that's next anyway.
It's next anyways. I don't think it matters, but for purposes of the record, just to be clear, this gentleman is not the applicant. He's not the owner. He's someone else who's been sworn who would like to offer evidence for your consideration.
Yes, ma'am, that's absolutely true. With that understanding, we'll give you a few minutes.
Should I sit down and come back?
No, we'll give you a few minutes right now,
I'm
but
just
we've
kidding.
already seen your letter and your information that you've shared.
Thank you. One thing that I just want to try to clarify and understand about the letters from SHPO, and I'll just read it. It says, as a result of the damage, of hurricane damage, the removal of the architectural elements described above, and the continued deterioration of the building no longer retains integrity of design, materials, workmanship, and feeling. He's talking about it no longer retains the things that would make it significant statewide, but they would also apply to making it significant locally. It's what was there is not there anymore. He wrote two more detailed emails after that. One was written at 9 in the morning, the other one was written at 1:30 in the afternoon.
Right.
And he kind of tries to explain that. But he said that the house falls within this historic district, has all these qualifications. But the important thing is that if the property retains its integrity, it says if it said it doesn't retain its integrity. It doesn't say it has historic significance. It said if it does, then all these things can be considered. So I kind of think what is there is a CMU shell, nothing else, and so it's difficult. And I can't comment. I'm a civil engineer. I'm not a historian, but that was just one point that I wanted to try to clarify or understand better. It seemed to me that he was saying that there's no structure to evaluate, and it's been allowed to deteriorate, and it no longer has integrity. The final thing I want to offer is I'm a buyer of the property. I'm not a developer. I don't intend to sell it. I'm from New Bern. I grew up here. Intend to live there. So my bar for, and I know we don't like to talk about cost and practical things, but any private individual that would buy the property would obviously have to consider the cost of the property, and if it, got too old to live in it, they would have to sell it, and they have to consider things like that. So my bar, not having to make a profit on it, is a lot lower than any other person that would buy this house. So what I'm saying, if we can't demolish this house, then that kind of puts, in my opinion, the owner in a very difficult position, in that you can't afford to make the house habitable. We've talked about that. That's jacking the floor up from 6 to 12 FFE. You can't afford to do that. You can't afford to put a roof on it and have something that you can't live in. So it's good money after bad. So I see it being a huge burden to the owner of the property. It wouldn't bother me. I have clothes on the property, but it would put a huge burden on her. And I intend to do something that's going to benefit New Bern, benefit East Front Street, be good for the streetscape, and I think it should be approved that we let us tear the thing down.
Okay, thank you for sharing that with us. Okay, so is there any rebuttal from the proponents? We've had 2 of y'all. Anything else you all want to say? Hearing none. We had no opponents. Is there anyone with relevant evidence and has standing? We don't have but just 1 or 2 people left in the audience that have spoken, so we don't have that. So, sir, could you tell us the staff findings and recommendations?
Definitely. Let me page down here. Okay. So this is for the applicant is Rosalie McDevitt and Go Architectural Design, and the project address is 715 East Front Street. The historic property name is the Bengal House, built circa 1950, and was listed as a contributing structure in the 2003 National Register inventory, which describes it as a 1-story, 4 bays wide, 2 bays deep, 2 8-light casements, first and second bays, front entrance in third bay, large double casement in a right bay, and gable end roof, interior ridge chimney offset to right. And the Sandbeck book had no description for it. So 715 East Front Street, the proposal is to include demolition of a contributing structure. It's just the demolition, it's not the redevelopment at this point. So the guidelines we submit that are appropriate to this application for demolition, 6.4.2, 6.4. Well, I guess I should read these because it's the first time going through these. It is not appropriate to demolish a viable contributing structure in order to create an infill construction opportunity. 6.4.3, the HPC reserves the right to postpone demolition until development and building permits are approved for redevelopment plans. 6.4.4, prepare drawings and photographically document the site prior to demolition. Include photographs of interiors, exteriors, architectural elements, and context within the streetscape. And 6.4.5, notify preservation organizations and allow for the salvage of design components, architectural features, and building materials for reuse. In addition, the guidelines stipulate the HPC should address the following 3 considerations. We went through these earlier, considerations 1, 2, and 3. So statements of reason based on the information contained in the application in staff's judgment are: 1, the project is a proposal to demolish a contributing resource. 2, the structure is in serious disrepair, has substantial structural deficiencies, and is not viable due to a combination of hurricane damage, subsequent interior elevation and rehabilitation construction, a pause in the construction after removing the roof and windows, then neglecting to protect the structure from the elements for over 1 year. 3, rehabilitation and reuse of the structure as a dwelling would require elevating the structure, which has twice proven to be unviable. 4, the applicant is proposing a new house and garage for the property, however, the design of which will still need to be approved by the HPC. 5, reuse of the structure as the garage for the new house is not possible without destroying the historic characteristics of the structure. 6, the zoning administrator and the chief building official have reviewed this project and commented accordingly. And 7, the project is not incongruous with the guidelines. So, staff recommends the commission approve this application to include demolition of a contributing structure. However, with the condition that demolition may not proceed until the following requirements are met, 1 through 4. 1, a certificate of appropriateness is issued for the redevelopment of the parcel. 2, building permits are approved for the redevelopment of the parcel. 3, drawings of the structure are submitted to the HPA. 4, documentation is submitted to the HPA regarding the applicant's notification to preservation organizations and allowing for the salvage of design components, architectural features, and building materials for reuse. I'd like to also add that a demolition permit also be required before, of course, demolition occurs. That's the end of my
That's the end of yours?
recommendation.
Okay. So do we have anybody here for evidence and testimony from the state, city, or any governmental body? Seeing none. Ma'am, would you like to make any final comments? No, she would not like to. So, members of the commission, what questions do you have? What discussions would you like to have about this proposal for demolition of a contributing structure?
I just have one question. We don't have the owner here, I guess. Has the owner signed on for this?
The owner is Rosalie McDivitt, and I brought this project before you all previously. She's aware of, she signed the owner authorization. She wants this to go forward, and honestly, she moved out of state. Her husband has Alzheimer's. And she has this property left in New Bern, and so she's not here as a present owner.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that sufficient for us to agree to demolish the building?
So legally, did she not sign a document for you to
She signed
represent?
I represent her. She
Yeah.
signed the owner
Okay.
authorization.
Yeah.
That's
She-
not.
we've
he's
seen
not
that
part
document.
of this application, except in the next run of it.
Okay.
Yeah, we've seen that document,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am, our attorney agrees with that.
Yes, ma'am, there's a duly authorized owner's authorization which allows Ms. Alphabet to represent the interests of the owner.
There- Yes, sir, she can.
Got it.
And she is not here now.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
I'm
Okay, that's fine,
Thank
we got you. You're covered on that, okay. Does anybody else have any questions, concerns as we vote for this demolition of this?
Well, I think it's worthy of notion, of mention that we had a productive conversation during design review and had covered a lot of these issues. As I look at the considerations and the bullets underneath each one, at the time of design review, only one of 3, 6, 7, 8, only one of 8 of those items was in question at that point, and it was this is a contributing structure, at least in terms of our nomination letter. We've received an evaluation from the State Historic Preservation Office that states that the loss of historic fabric and integrity essentially eliminates the criteria that allowed it to be a contributing structure in the first place. So at least in my opinion, I think we've not covered all the ground and done all the due diligence, but relative to similar types of applications, this one is clearly in a certain column, in my opinion.
Okay, Thank you, sir, for covering that, because we did spend a lot of time in design review discussing all of these things. And we're thankful that John Woods was very quick, and we thank staff for getting to him and getting the very specific information and details that we as a commission needed to have before we could make a determination. Now, just to be clear on that point, does anybody on the commission have any other questions that they might have from all of the information that John Wood shared with us, and any other questions regarding what we need to understand and have to demolish this building? Does anybody have a question? Think, if you have a question, say it, ask it now, because we're getting ready to go past the point of no return.
Question. It's called a contributing structure. I have some questions about what does it contribute? I mean, you can't build on the property unless you let it go. What's left of it, it's an eyesore to the neighborhood. No one else can purchase it to put anything on it because it's not feasible to put that much money into it to try to do something to it, as if you could.
Well,
So-
it was a contributing structure when it was built, when it was whole. I mean, we've been dealing with this building for some period of time, a year or more. When
Right.
it had a roof, when it had a chimney, when you could go in it. And before the hurricane came and did terrible things to it, and then it had sat for 2 or 3 years, and it now does not, and this is the point that I think everybody is making, is that it no longer looks like a contributing structure, because there's nothing there but walls. I don't know if all of you all, I'm assuming all of you all have, and I know I've certainly been out there yesterday, there's nothing left but walls. And sir, I think you provided those pictures, did you not? And there's cracks in many of those walls. And as has been stated, the building can't be lifted up, it can't be moved. It is just walls sitting out there at this point. So it's a contributing structure way back, years ago, when it was a building that was inhabitable. But it is no longer has that character of being a contributing structure. Does that help you?
Yes,
Okay.
I
Okay.
could not agree more. It is, at this point, I think we have to just face the fact that time does move on.
Time has moved on with this building.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so nobody else has a question at this point. Okay? All right, so the staff has a motion here about their recommendations about what has to happen. Let me read this again. Recommends the commission approve this application to include demolition of a contributing structure. However, with the conditions that the demolition may not proceed until the following requirements are met. There's 4 listed here, and 5 needs to be that you get a demolition permit.
Right.
Okay? So these things, you all understand that these things would have to be met before the building could be demolished. Okay? So I see these 2 people that are involved with this building shaking their head, yes, they understand this. Okay? Just so we're all clear. Madam, is there anything else we need to make clear before we do this?
Not that hasn't been addressed, no, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So, can we have a motion for this application of demolishing this contributing structure with the conditions that these 4 conditions that are here, and the 5th condition being that a demolition permit would be required, and that the building cannot be demolished until these 5 things are taken care of? Can I have a motion?
Yes. Madam Chair?
Okay, thank you.
I move that we approve the demolition of the property at 715 East Front Street based on the standards for demolition 6.4.2 through 5, and with the following conditions stated in Matt's recommendation plus the condition of a demolition permit. Is that sufficient?
I would state the conditions specifically.
So go through these 4 conditions right here.
Okay. Based on the conditions, a certificate of appropriateness be issued for the redevelopment of the parcel. The building permits are approved for the redevelopment of the parcel. Drawings of the structure are submitted to HPC, I assume.
No, that would be me. HPA. is-
HPA.
Yep.
Documentation is submitted to the HPA regarding the applicant's notification to preservation organizations and allowing for the salvage of design components, architectural features, and building materials for reuse, and the applicant gets a permit for demolition.
Okay. So I just want to ask you one more time, I know I may be delivering this, but we are saying that we're going to demolish one of our buildings here in the city. So I just want to make sure that no other commissioners have any questions before we vote, or any comments.
We need a second.
I'm not there just yet, I'm gonna get there.
Can I ask that Commissioner Bisbee augment your motion to include findings of fact?
I would do that. What did you construe as the findings of fact? The 7 items you had listed?
Yes, if you want.
I'd be glad to include those as findings of fact. You want me to state them?
Yeah, I
Yes, you
guess-
need to state them all,
Yeah,
yes, sir.
sorry.
So it's on the record, so that we're all clear that we're going, since we're looking at demolishing a building here in town.
The findings of fact to be included are the project is a proposal to demolish a contributing resource. Structure is in serious disrepair, has substantial structural deficiencies, and is not viable due to a combination of hurricane damage, subsequent interior elevation and rehabilitation construction, a pause in the construction after removing the roof and windows, then neglecting to protect the structure from the elements for over 1 year. Rehabilitation and reuse of the structure as a dwelling would require elevating the structure, which has twice proven to be unviable. The applicant is proposing a new house and garage for the property. However, the design of which will still need to be approved by the HPC. Reuse of the structure as a garage for the new house is not possible without destroying the historic characteristics of the structure.
Are there some more there?
Move the screen
Oh,
up.
sorry.
Move it up.
The zoning administrator and the chief building official have reviewed the project and commented accordingly. The project is not incongruous with the guidelines.
Okay. All in favor of the motion?
I'll second that.
Oh, second, thank you, second. Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, the motion passed. Can I have a motion?
No COA.
Say that again?
There's no COA.
Yeah, that's the next thing. So at this point then, what we need to do is wait for these conditions to be met by them reporting back to you. Is that the point that we're at now?
So their next step is to submit an application for redevelopment of the parcel,
Right?
with or without the existing building, and then proceed from there. At some point, if and when that happens, that they receive approval, and then they have the other items that were just listed as conditions also taken care of eventually, then they would be able to demolish the structure.
Right, so then you all need to be in communication with this gentleman here for you all to move forward.
So, and I would submit that the drawings may be the drawings, because the drawings at the moment would be of a semi-demolished structure. I would submit that the drawings should actually end up being the drawings maybe that Charles Francis had done earlier when it was still a single structure. I mean, it was in its original condition.
Okay? All right, so they'll communicate with you until they need to come back to us once they have plans for
Right.
the new house that'll go on the property.
Yes, the intent for the drawings is that it becomes a record of a previously historic structure
Yes.
and for posterity and future research or otherwise, so.
Right, so they'll.
So nobody wants to end up seeing a drawing of a house with no roof and no chimney and, all that stuff
Right.
missing. So,
Okay, so there'll be that, and then I guess there'll be some pictures too of unfortunately what happened.
yes, we have 30 pictures of it now, so I
Yes,
think the
so
pictures
we've
are
got all
good,
those
it's just the
pictures.
drawings.
Okay. Ma'am, is there anything else we should do regarding this?
Yes, Madam Chair, if the COA is not going to be issued tonight, we need a motion to delay the issuance of the COA.
Okay?
And that motion should include findings to support the delay. So for example, by way of example, I move to continue or delay the issuance of the COA to allow the applicant to provide 1, 2, 3, 4 to the HPC in compliance with the conditions.
Okay?
And that could be pursuant to guideline 6.4.3.
Yes. I had noted that earlier that we need to do that. Okay. So let us have a motion related to that.
I move that we continue approval of the certificate of appropriateness pending the completion of item 6.4.3 in the demolition standards.
Okay? And do we need to specify specifically what needs to be done, the 5 things that need to be done in this? So if you could go on down here, you could scroll on down so that he can say that?
Maybe I can assist. Mr. Bisbee, I think what I'm hearing you say is you move to continue the issuance of the COA for this particular project at 715 East Front Street based on the following finding of fact, that the applicant has not yet submitted
Gotten approval for.
or gotten approval for a building permit, demolition permit, or provided drawings of the structure.
And a COA for the redevelopment of the parcel.
Or a COA for the redevelopment of the parcel, and needs time to do so, and that delaying the issuance of a COA for this property would be justified, fair, and reasonable. I think that's Mr. Bisbee's motion.
That's what I meant to say.
That's what he meant to say, yes. Yes, that's what he meant to say.
Way to go, Jim.
Yes, that is the motion.
Yeah.
I second that.
All right, thank you very much. I knew we needed you here. Okay, that's the motion.
I second it.
Okay, we got a second. Did you want to say something?
I was going to remind you to take a vote.
Okay, Thank you. All of those in favor of this second motion, say aye.
Aye.
All of those opposed, hearing none, the motion passes. Is there anything, ma'am, else we need to do?
Not as it relates to this application.
Thank you. Okay. They want to get it all right because we don't do this very often, so we need to check off all our boxes. Okay, so I believe we are done with item 715 East Front Street, and it'd be up to you all, Sarah, to get in contact. It'd be up to you all, Sarah, to get in contact with Matt to move forward, and then we'll be seeing you at some point.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Tom. Tell Judith I said hello. Madam Chair, I move that we bring Ms. Sullivan back to the bench.
Okay, all of those in favor say aye.
Madam Chair, you need a second.
Do what?
Need a second for the motion.
Do we have a second?
TV.
Second.
Got a second over here on the end. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none? Okay. She may rejoin us. Okay, thank you very much. Sir, I guess we're going to see you again.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes? Okay, we look forward to it. Okay, thanks. Come on. We've already voted you back. Okay. So our next item is 302 Broad Street,
Yes.
which is going to be delayed until the next meeting.
We would like, they have requested essentially a continuance to the next meeting. So if you would have a motion to continue the application
Are they going to continue it to the next meeting next month,
November 17th.
to November the 17th? Okay, so we need a continuance to November the 17th at 5:30 PM in the courtroom, second floor, City Hall of Newbern. We need all those details
That's right.
in that.
Madam Chair, I move that we continue the application for 302 Broad Street to November 17th, 2021, 5:30 PM here at City Hall in the courtroom at the request of the applicant.
Okay.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
So moved.
Second.
Second. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Do we have any opposed? None, the motion passes. So we'll see that on November the 17th.
Okay.
Okay, 407 Avenue D. Can we hear some information about a new shed in the tertiary?
Okay. 407 Avenue D, the applicant has arrived after the swearing in, so I'll go ahead and swear the
I was going to
swearing in.
say he was not here. I was going to wait either before or after you did your thing. Okay, go ahead.
So on your screens, you'll see that this is the application for 407 Avenue D. The owners are John Roland Yao and Alice Ann Yao, and the applicant is John Friesen. And we'll see that the application is to install a prefabricated 12 by 32 gambrel roof shed in the backyard. And they've provided a whole series of guidelines and a lot of information that we'll see in a minute. And there it is signed by Mr. Friesen, who is hereby, with this certificate of appropriateness, authorized by first John Roland Yao, and also, on the next one, Alice Yao, to be their authorized representative. All right, so first we'll start off with just an overview of an aerial view of the site. So in yellow, highlighted in yellow, and among other things, well, so the shed is to be located back here in the shade of these trees back here. But to note here is that there are 4 neighbors, so that we don't get confused. There's a neighbor to the northeast here, which their property ends actually between the 2 buildings back here, and then a neighbor who actually fronts on Pasteur Street, and they have this building here. Then there are 2 neighbors off of National Avenue. This first one here has a outbuilding back here in this corner of their property, and then finally Mr. Friesen actually lives in this corner lot. And he has a large garage that's actually located in this corner of that lot. Also to note, and it will show up confusing in a minute, but there is a fence on Mr. Friesen's property and a driveway on Mr. Friesen's property, which belong to Mr. Friesen, but it will look like it belongs to the subject house when we look at it from the front, but that is not the case. The property line actually is kind of along the side of the driveway. Again, the yellow box is not entirely accurate. Okay, so therefore, we have a site plan. And the site plan shows a little bit better that the property lines for the property are 9 feet from the house on this left side, and Mr. Friesen's garage is shown here. The other neighbor on National Avenue, we have numbers for these so we can reference them if we want. 1416 is his. The next one down is 1410. The neighbor on Avenue D is 405 and has their shed here, and 1409 has their shed here. And the proposal is to put the shed back there with the rest of the sheds, so to say. equally spaced to the side yards of 9 feet, which is way beyond the minimum. We do, however, need a dimension to the rear property line.
Sorry, it's 12 feet, yeah.
12 feet to the rear property line? Okay. So, all right. And then he's got more than 8 feet to the main house, and otherwise, we'll move on. So, oops. Sorry. So first, we'll take a look at the front of the house. And this is why I was saying it would be confusing. This driveway is not the subject driveway to the subject house. This is Mr. Friesen's driveway and his garage back here. The property line must be somewhere along in between here, about 9 feet from the existing house, from the subject house. All right. Then, this is the backyard of the subject property, and you can begin to see some of the other sheds. This one is the one on National Avenue that is not Mr. Friesen's. So that's that one, and then on the left we'll see some other pictures. But the shed is going here, essentially in front of where this trailer is on this grassy area. All right, and so now these are the other two sheds to the left side, or the eastern side of the property, with this being the one for Avenue D and this one for Pasteur Street. They are apparently right on the property line, or close to, at least the fence is. And then the other one on National Avenue that I just pointed out a few minutes ago is here, the outbuilding, so to say. You can see there's that trailer, and you can see the corner of Mr. Friesen's garage here. That's a black and white shot. And now a black and white of Mr. Friesen's garage that we saw from the street. They've provided construction drawings for the entire structure. The main ones will be, the floor plan does show that it can be 8 to 13 feet wide and 12 to 40 feet long for this set of drawings. Roof framing, a section, but mainly the side elevations. So this would be essentially the front facing the house, and we'll see an actual photograph of the sample building. But this one does show that the materials are either metal or fiberglass roofing, and then the trim is 1x4 trim or Duratrim, and the siding is T111 or Duratrim siding. They will be having a double door. It shows up as a couple inches over the ground on skids of some sort. And all of those are construction details. So this was the elevation we had seen last week or 2 weeks ago, but he's provided some new ones. This is now a sample of what it would look like in its full size and shape and materials. Just that these materials, the wood would be painted, has said in an email, in documentation. So, and the door, you can see as well, the windows, he's documented will be metal windows. So here's that documentation, actually down here. Here he has in red that the windows will be metal, the window pane dividers will be metal, and there will be no plans to cover the opening, the little slot underneath the shed. So, all right, and then for our zoning and inspections, the zoning official said that it must meet setbacks and separation requirements, which he's demonstrated in the site plan. And the chief building inspector says that a building permit is required if any dimension is greater than 12 feet, by far. So then we're ready with our recommendations.
Okay. Is there anyone who has a conflict of interest on this project? Hearing none and seeing none. Sir, is there anything else you'd like to say about your project?
No, I really don't have too much to add. It's just Roland, Alice Yar, my parents-in-law, and the shed will be both jointly used by me as a workshop and by my father-in-law.
Okay.
But that's why we want the shed there, just to store things and tools and work in it.
Okay, all right, okey dokey. I'm going to ask about notified proponents and notified opponents, but there's nobody left out there unless you're one of those people, but I don't think so. So we don't need to go through rebuttal. We don't need to go through relevant evidence and standing because there's nobody out there with that. So I think that we would go to, and there's nobody from the city, state, or government out there. So I think we are at staff findings.
Okay, so here we have, for the applicants are John and Alice Yao and John Friesen. 407 Avenue D. This project is to include the installation of a new shed in the Tertiary AVC. In the 1988 inventory, the house, historic property name is House, built circa 1926. It is listed as a contributing structure. And the description for the house is similar in form to the house at the corner of this block, which is 404 Avenue C. This L-shaped frame house apparently dates from the late 1940s. It is topped by a single side gable roof and has a projecting front bay, large rear wing, and an exterior end chimney. There is a picture window to the right of the entrance and a greenhouse porch on the southwest elevation. Other windows are 6/6 sash. Sandbeck had no description of that. So staff submits the following historic district guidelines are appropriate to this application. For accessory structures, 2.6.1 and 2.6.3. For design principles, 3.1.1, 3.1.2. For foundations, 4.1.2, 4.1.3. For walls, trim, and ornamentation, 4.2.4, 4.2.5. For windows, doors, and openings, 4.3.2, 4.3.3. Masonry, I don't think we have any, since they're not doing a skirt at the bottom. Paint, 5.4.2, 5.4.3. Contemporary materials, 5.5.1, 5.5.2, and 5.5.3. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: the structure is a contributing resource in the tight weave development pattern. The project is within the tertiary AVC. All components and materials meet the requirements of the guidelines. Zoning administrator and the chief building official have reviewed this project and commented accordingly. And 5, the project is not incongruous with the guidelines. So staff recommends the commission approve this application to include the installation of a new shed at the tertiary AVC with the following condition. Prior to installation of the shed, a site plan. Oh, so I guess we don't need that. So forget that condition. Done.
Okay. All right. Any final comments you all would like to make? Okay. Hearing none. Members of the commission, what questions do you have? What comments do you want to make at this point? Hearing none. Could I have a motion related to this project?
Madam, I've got a motion to approve the application to include the installation of a new shed, tertiary AVC with the following condition. Prior to installation of the shed, a site plan showing the location of the shed relative to property lines and the house be submitted to the HPA and reviewed and approved by the HPC and zoning administrator.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Madam Chair, I think what
Yeah.
Mr. Blackwelder's motion is.
Is it insufficient? Insufficient.
Well, I think what he was trying to say was that he moves to approve the application for the installation of the shed in the tertiary AVC, and he also wants to include the findings of fact that are on the screen.
Listed as statements of reason.
Listed as statements of reason.
It's also required that we have to list appropriate guidelines in the motion.
So I think his revised motion, can you scroll up?
Yep.
Will include the information about accessory structures, design principles, foundations, et cetera.
You need to name all of those, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah. He doesn't know that yet, so.
He can give the numbers.
John, can you also move your microphone a little closer, please?
I'm scared to.
So if you will go through the accessory structure design principles and give the numbers over there under each of those items, and if you will follow him and scroll him through that.
So in addition, I also request that the following in the application as well.
I'm sorry, I
The
didn't.
following,
Based on the findings of fact.
following finding in fact, accessory structures 2.6.1, 2.6.3, design principles 3.1.1, 3.1.2, foundations 4.1.2, 4.1.3, walls, trim, ornamentation 4.2.4, 4.2.5, windows, doors, and openings 4.3.2 and 4.3.3, masonry 5.1.2.
I don't
Sorry.
think there's any masonry, I don't
No
think.
masonry.
There's no masonry, but go on with paint and contemporary
Okay,
materials.
I'll skip the rest of masonry, go to paint, 5.4.2, 5.4.3, contemporary materials, 5.5.1, 5.5.2, 5.5.3.
And the next portion, please. Mr.
Findings
Whitmore.
of fact.
And the findings of fact, number one, structure is contributing resource in the tight weave development pattern. The project is within the tertiary AVC. All components and materials meet the requirements of the guidelines. The zoning administrator and chief building official have reviewed the project and recommended accordingly.
And 5.
And five, the project is not incongruous with the guidelines.
There we go.
So we've had a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Have a second. All of those in favor say aye. Aye. All of those opposed, hearing none, the motion passed. Can we have a motion to issue a COA?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All of those opposed say nay. Hearing none, the COA can be approved. Okay? You're welcome.
Thank you.
So if you'll get with Matt, then he'll carry on with you. Okay, so now we're to 810 East Front Street. When you're ready, Matt.
Yes. All right. My cheat sheet is missing. All right. So this is the application for 810 East Front Street. The owners are Kent and Sherry Lucas, and the applicant is Go Architectural Design PLLC, Sarah Afflerbach AIA. So the application is to construct a new two-story single-family home on an empty lot. See plans and elevations for details and material choices. We have a list of guidelines they find appropriate, and the materials are also listed here as well. And the application is signed and dated by the duly appointed owner's authorized representative, which is shown here. Go Architectural Design by Kent Lucas, and notarized. So this is the front page, giving you a quick peek at the elevation, front elevation. And then also we have on the next sheet I need to show you which lot it is. We're talking about this middle one on the right-hand side in this site plan. So it is facing west to the street and east to the river. And so these are some of the shots of the surrounding area. Essentially, we're talking about a vacant lot in the middle of this block over here. There are currently no structures built there. And those are some photographs of the other surrounding buildings nearby if we want to reference them. Here is a closer up site plan showing, among other things, for the site plan benefit is we have a front stairway out to the sidewalk, and otherwise the building fits inside the building envelope. We have some other floor plans to look at in a minute. So specifically, the very first bottom level, the property line is actually this dashed line at the top and the dashed line at the bottom. And then the solid line here is the building envelope. And so again, the steps out to the sidewalk up to above this level is the entryway. So this level is this east or western half is a garage with a stairway and an elevator. And then on the eastern half of this is essentially open to the elements in essence, although we'll see some brick lattice walls along these first two bays on the south and the first two bays on the north as well. And then I think we're missing the rest of the driveway out to the road, which is over here between these two lines here. Oh, also to note is the location of the trash enclosure and the HVAC platform. All right. So then the first floor, the entryway continues up to this, first floor, second floor? I guess it's the second floor really, because the first floor was the garage. And the entranceway is up to the side, is a side entrance, side of the front porch. And then otherwise, for our reference, there is a back porch on the second floor. And then we'll go to the next floor. Third floor also has another porch on top of the previous one. And otherwise, no other exterior elements to note. So we have on the left is the actual front elevation of the house. You can see the entry stairway on the left, which goes to a landing at this height and then continues up in the shadows, so to say, up to the actual first floor up here at this, along this dashed line here. So also important to note here is that the while the first floor elevation, as I noted, is up here at this dashed line here, the siding has been extended far below the first floor down to 5 foot 7.5 inches if you include the trim board from the ground in order to reduce the visual appearance of that foundation wall. And you can see they're using the pier and infill pattern, with the infill being a herringbone pattern and a diagonal trim border. Then on the rear, and we really should go to the side first, but I'm going to do the rear first. So from the rear, you can see the two garage doors on the back half of the first floor, and also an entry door. And then you can see the two porches up here. Remember, they had that notch cut out of that right-hand side, or the northeastern corner. So this portion with this gable sticks out farther than the other portion behind it. Let's see. And you can see there's the decorative work and the gable, the tip of the gable on both the front and the rear. All right, so now we'll go to side view, and this is the side where the entrance is, so the north side. And here we see the steps going up to that landing I was mentioning, the landing being behind the face of the the face of the building here, several feet, and then some more steps up to the actual landing for the doorway. Okay. Also to note here is that this rectangular area is actually an opening into the space underneath all of these steps. Then on the left here, you can see the lattice work I was pointing out. So on this elevation, they've also extended the siding down as they did on the front, because you can see again the dashed line here, the second dashed line here is the actual floor level, which is normally where the siding stops, kind of like here on the left, but they've extended it down to reduce that height of the foundation. And a little bit more here on the left is the rest of the open area underneath at the first level is open. These white areas are actually open, so it's just freestanding brick piers underneath the porches. The applicant has also indicated they will be that they would like to remove the muntins from the upper half of the windows so that the windows would end up being just 1/1 instead of 4/1. Let's see. So I took care of that for you, Sarah.
I brought revised drawings.
Oh, okay. Okay. So now on the south elevation, you can see the steps on the left that are on the far end of the house. So the actual elevation starts here at this corner. And you can see on this elevation, they've also extended the siding down several feet on this side until it reaches the open lattice work at the back. This shows the pent roof over the garage access door, and we do have 2 windows that are not vertical or square. I suspect that was one of the changes you're going to show us. And otherwise, the rest of the elevation is, I guess, relatively clear and understandable. All right, so then at the design review meeting, you requested to see the kind of streetscape, all of the houses lined up.
Mm-hmm.
So the subject house is this one right here in the top center. And I think we've seen the design for the one next to it.
That was approved.
And was approved. So that one's approved. The one on the corner down here on the right, next to Queen's Point, has also been approved, I believe, right?
Yeah.
This one on the left has been proposed, but I think maybe under revision. And then directly across the street from the subject house is the existing house that has the 3 levels of balconies there, the big square box building. And that's essentially the profile of that one. She does not, of course, have a drawing of that, but then the other houses that have been proposed, at least if not approved for that other side, or even are now constructed, are these other 3 over here. And then on the other end, I do know, the 2 on the ends have been constructed. I don't know which one of the others, of these 2, which one was constructed?
Not the middle one.
This one here?
Yeah, that hasn't been done yet.
Okay, so that one's been constructed too. So basically the 2 left and the right, and the one in the middle of the picture. And the one next to it, have we approved that one?
Yeah.
So,
13 approved.
yeah. How about 14?
Yeah, 13 and 14 were both.
All right.
13 constructed.
So,
But the one in the middle hasn't been, it's been approved, it's not built.
okay. All right, so there you go. There's your kind of elevations. We can zoom in and out of that if you need to. And she's included some photographs of some other similar historic buildings at the bottom of that page as well. So we then have our zoning and inspections. I can't read that. so I'll have to make it bigger. The zoning administrator says that it meets the requirements of the land use ordinance, and the building inspector says it will, of course, need a building permit. All right, then we're ready for recommendations whenever you are.
Okay, do we have anybody who has a conflict of interest or any issues with the application at this point? Seeing none. Ma'am, would you like to add anything else to the presentation?
I don't know if you want to see this, but I went around town today and I looked at other foundations and how high they were above the street. And if that's a concern to you all, I have that information. I can put it up here on the projector. If you would like to see that just in relationship to what, how high it is, and, you know, really in trying to work through, for us was a new problem, which was to have the garage on the first level while still maintaining a house front. You know, we haven't really done that before. Matt, can I put this?
So do you want her to go ahead and show us that now?
Or I can just pass it around too.
Or later on? Y'all want to see that now?
Yes.
I
Yes,
just don't
we
want it
want
to
to
be
see
an
it.
issue, you know, as in
You
discussion.
want there, or you want to pass it around?
Okay, so it's
Well,
one
we can
copy,
put it
so
up.
you'll have to pass it.
Matt, does it work or?
I think so. I don't know.
Usually look a lot like
How I can make this a little smaller so I can get more in my screen. Can you-
We can't. He can. I don't think we can. I don't think we have any control. Oh, that's right.
Can you all see that? Oh,
It
you're
says
not on
it's
screen,
off my
so-
screen.
I don't know. We'll have to ask later.
Matt, can I have a question? Is there a way you can adjust the screen? It's so blown up that I don't get a picture. It's up, so you can.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's weird.
yeah.
Okay. I do not know how I can do that.
I'll just,
We have to
I'll
do it
just
again.
look over.
Yeah.
And this one's not on either, Matt.
Can you share? What?
Yeah.
This one is not on either.
Yours isn't on?
No. I'm
Mine's just right.
borrowing it from John.
Yeah. Can you see his okay?
Yes, that's fine.
All right. All right. I would call Tony, but by the time we get him, we'll be done.
No, that's fine. I can see it.
And so how tall is yours?
It's 7'6" to the first landing
Okay.
from grade. And, you know, I did bring the site, which has the different grades around. And I know that I'm using a flat line as grade, but the reality is it will be a little bit less than what I have drawn just because, you know, there will be a slight change in grade, you know, probably 6 inches or so. So in measuring 717 East Front Street, which is the new house, that landing is, you know, I'm taking I'm just measuring it to you know, where the plants are, and it's 7'6". And that's one of the newer houses built. And then 505 East Front Street is 8'8" to their first floor landing. And 101 Edgerton, we've got 9 foot, and 600 Edgerton, 10'6". So I just wanted to just put that out there because what we're trying to do is make a landing for this house so that it has street access while not doing, you know, this, which has the garage in the front, which we can't do. But it, you know, similar to this, trying to solve the same problem where you're parking underneath the house completely, you know, as everyone does on Edgerton, or even, you know, on East Front Street, there's parking underneath first floor, but also making that landing accessible to the street, and bringing that first landing down lower. So I don't know how much of an issue that is for you, but that was one of the concerns trying to look at the design of this house.
And Sarah, am I remembering correctly that in an earlier rendering, you had the wall coming down further on the side? In other words, it was extended beyond where the actual foundation is.
The wall.
The wall, yes.
The siding.
In this drawing.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I wasn't quite understanding. Right, so what we have here is, the first floor is here, but we've brought the siding down, so 5'7" is kind of somewhere in the middle between what's built out there right now, say, something like the blue house, which is 7'6". So somewhere kind of in that mid-range, high enough so it still reads as a foundation, but, putting that window in there so it has a street presence, but masking the fact that there's an actual garage space behind there. Yeah. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, that's all you have to say right now, okay? All right? So, there is nobody left for opponents, proponents, rebuttals, there's no city, state, anybody else left out there. So, I guess, sir, we're back to you.
Okay. Oh, right. Thank you.
No, we're blank up here.
Yeah.
Just thinking about it.
I know. Yes. And this one is the PCCM table.
There it is.
Oh,
Yeah,
don't touch anything.
Okay. Just have to be patient. Technology's so fast these days. All right. And we'll zoom in. And off the page. Okay. A little too close, huh? So this, recommendations for Kent and Sherry Lucas and Go Architectural Design for 810 East Front Street. There is no historic property name. It is a vacant lot, and there are no National Register inventory descriptions or sandbag descriptions for an empty lot. 810 East Front Street is to include construction of a new infill house on a vacant parcel. Staff submits the following historic district guidelines are appropriate to this application. For development pattern 2.1.1, 2, and 3, design principles 3.1.1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. For infill construction 3.4.1, 2, 3, and 4. For foundations 4.1.3, 4, and 5. I've included an illustration of the base flood elevation for the site. 810 East Front Street is indicated to be 8 feet. And to note that the city requirements are to add 2 feet to that for the flood requirements, giving you 10 feet. 4.1.6, walls, trim, and ornamentation, 4.2.4. Windows, doors, and openings, 4.3.2.3. Entrances, 4.4.4. Roofs, 4.5.4. Decks and patios, 4.6.2. Masonry, 5.1.3, 5, and 6. Metals, 5.3.3 and 4. Paint, 5.4.2, 3, 4, and 6. So the statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: 1, the project is located in a narrow stitch development pattern. 2, the proposal is an infill project. 3, depending on the interpretation of guideline 4.1.5, and except for the shape of 2 windows, the proposed design components and materials might meet the requirements of guidelines. 4, the zoning administrator and the chief building official have reviewed this project and commented accordingly. And 5, the project is not incongruous with the guidelines. So staff recommends the commission either continue the application until the floor elevation can be rectified to meet the requirements of guideline 4.1.5, or approve this application for construction of a new infill house on a vacant parcel on condition that the shape of 2 windows be changed to meet guideline 4.3.2.
And what 2 windows are you talking about? Those 2 windows you talked about on the side that are square?
Yeah, yes, that are horizontally rectangular.
Okay. All right. So, we've had your information, there's none of that. So, any final comments, ma'am, you want to make?
We can make those windows square.
Are they not square now?
They're rectangular.
Oh, okay.
And are you thinking of 2 squares next to each other, or are you thinking just square? One square. Okay. Either way would be.
Okay. Okay, so what questions, concerns do the commission have and part of what we need to deal with is these 2 items here at the end. We've talked about the windows. This item that has to do with guideline 4.1.5. Can you bring that guideline back up? 4.1. This has to do with how high the house can be elevated. So the issue is around the elevation of 2 feet above the current height, right?
That's the requirement, which would be 10 feet, and there's proposing, I believe, 17 feet. Oops. So if we look at the elevations. Sorry. So we see. Oh. Okay. So here we have. It's either 7 or 8 feet to the grade, and then from sea level, and then 10 feet to the ceiling, and then I think in her other parts of her drawing, it's 1 foot 4 inches to the next floor. So it's 17, 18, 19, 18.4 total to the floor level? Yes. Okay. Now, generally, depending on the location of the ductwork in a house, the ductwork also has to be above that flood level, so we generally allow about 2 feet to allow for the structure, and then the ductwork under the structure, on top of the already required 2 feet. So that would leave us at 12 feet approximately. Now, we don't know if there will be ductwork, and maybe, I don't know what your mechanical system is going to be.
I just want to make sure everyone understands when you say those dimensions, that's from mean sea level. So for
That's correct.
these other projects that you have approved, you know, like this one or any on Edgerton, those are the same dimensions. You know, even though we're showing 10 foot from grade, there's still another 8 foot to mean sea level. So this house is not any higher than any of these houses. You know, the first floor level is, and that guideline specifically was
So-
written for raising
Yeah,
houses.
a couple things. One is, at least one or two of those were built way before flood plains were even devised. The other ones that are more modern, the flood maps have just recently been changed. And in one case, at least, I believe it was built incorrectly or before we even established, first of all, the new guidelines that buildings should not be elevated above the required height. So all of them kind of predate our current guideline.
All of the ones that she's showing us
Yes,
pictures of.
because none of them have been built in the last 6 months.
But the guideline was written for elevating houses. This is new construction as, the floor level on this house is no higher than what we're proposing. That's what I'm trying to make sure everyone understands, is that 18 floors from mean sea level, 0. The grade here, there's still another 8 foot to mean sea level.
What's the ground, what's the elevation of the ground? Like what,
10, it's
the ground is what, I mean, it's from mean sea level?
11.4.
So you're at 11.4, starting at the ground.
Yeah.
And then you're adding,
To the very top, but the
Right.
landing is at 7.6.
right.
And that's why we tried to bring that,
Yeah, the first landing, which
the
is not
first
floor level.
landing, to bring that down so that that's comparable to the other houses, so that you couldn't really tell.
So, just to be clear, that's all well and good, but the requirements for the flood district, for our floodplain ordinance, requires that a house have the floor level, or at least also the ductwork, above, in this case, 10 feet. Above. That's all they care about. It has to at least be above 10 feet.
Mean sea level.
Right, 10 feet above sea level, correct, sorry. So in this case, that would be, 2 feet above grade. However, our guidelines have just been,
No. Because grade's at 7 foot. So we're at 9 foot, and then plus the 2 foot freeboard, and then plus the floor structure on top of that.
right,
So not 2 foot above grade. That's,
no. So let me go back. So, the floodplain requirement is to have either the first floor or the ductwork, which is usually underneath the floor joists, above, in this case, 10 feet above sea level. So if you add the 2 feet for a duct and floor joists, then you're at 12 feet to the first floor. That would be if there are ducts in the ceiling of the garage, then that would be the height, that would be the minimum height for the flood ordinance. All right? So, and as far as the flood ordinance is concerned, you can go 20, 30 feet, they don't care. So, however, therefore, our guidelines have said, well, we do care, and we only want them at the required height. So either the ductwork is at 10 feet above sea level.
11 feet. So let's just clarify that for a minute. So we're at 9 foot above mean sea level for flood, and then New Bern has a 2 foot.
No, it's 8.
For this property?
Yes, it's 8. I just showed that. This is the flood map.
How could that be?
That blue map. Oh,
Page 4, sir.
yeah. So up here. Dang. Gotta fix this. All right. So this map here. This is the actual official flood map, and it shows where the yellow pin is 810 East Front Street. And the base flood, in fact, that entire area, the base flood elevation, and it even labels it there, EL8 is 8 feet. So the regulatory requirement, the requirement of the ordinance is that everything be above 10 feet. Easy enough. So our guidelines then, however, say to limit elevation to a minimum height required by ordinance, to the minimum height. So that is 10 feet. So, however, as Ms. Afflerbach has pointed out, we do use the word elevation, limit elevation. When elevating a structure in flood zones, limit elevation to the minimum height. So she is not elevating a structure, she's building or proposing to build a structure. Do you agree that that's the case, or does that still, I mean, is the intent of the guideline supposed to include new construction? Is new construction supposed to be allowed to go whatever height they want?
I've got two questions.
Or is it really only just elevating?
The first question is, does this meet the at least minimum? I'm clarifying that.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
So
so
she's
we're good there.
proposing,
Okay,
yeah.
number two, were the previous houses that have been approved, that are next door or down the street, do they have to adhere to this same, let's call it new ordinances in the last 6 months? That was before I got here, so.
So ones prior to this, prior to the new guideline, did not have that requirement.
So if we impose this, what is this going to do to the aesthetic of the street?
Right.
That's the
So
question
all of
I've
them,
got.
however, have been at or close to that anyway.
I have a question to tag on to that. There is also a sort of part B, is the total elevation of the homes are all aesthetically in that range. And so when we say that a new home could go any height they want, it's all relative to the overall height of the house. So I don't think you're going to have somebody putting a 20-foot foundation on a house, so they're not going to have much home above that. So I feel like that there's a part B to it. It's the minimum that you're looking at, and you're also looking at an overall height. And that overall height is within the other homes that have been approved. And there's also been steps taken to mitigate the height, the visual height of that. So I feel like that bigger picture is part of the decision.
And I think that guideline is appropriate for elevating an existing structure. You know, the houses down on Edgerton that, require the garage under the house, I mean, that ordinance would then limit what has already been approved in those cases, which to me doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but that was built before this ordinance, that was passed before this ordinance came about.
Right.
Right, and that's what he's saying. These things that you're showing us were approved before this ordinance came about.
But I don't think you would have not approved this, for an existing structure, raising it really high up in the air, I understand that completely. But for something that is in the floodplain and wants to get the first floor, completely out of the floodplain, I mean.
Well, we would have gone by whatever the ordinances were. We would have paid attention to those.
Right, but I think the intent of that ordinance when written is for, as it states in the ordinance, elevating structures.
Madam Chair, in the spirit of being helpful, there's been a lot of conversation about intent. From a legal perspective, a court would look at the plain reading of the law, which in this case would be either the ordinance or the specific guideline. And as 4.1 states, when elevating a structure in flood zones, it's the first phrase of the sentence, then it proceeds to discuss limiting elevation. So I would encourage the deliberations to focus on not so much the intent, but the plain reading of the law as we have it in this moment.
And we're not asking for a structure to be elevated.
Well, you're asking to have a structure be put in a flood zone.
But we're not asking for a structure to be elevated.
And the bottom line is that house
Well,
doesn't
you are,
end
because
up
you're
any
asking to
taller
build
than
it.
any other.
We're
Do
not
what?
asking,
Well, the bottom line on this, though, is, as you pointed out, that house isn't going to be taller than the other houses on the street.
right, right. And we're not, as the attorney has pointed out, we are not asking for a structure. There's no structure there. We're not asking for a structure to be elevated. And, you know, if I understand what you were saying with that, that is the plain reading of it. And this house will be within the height limit of the ordinance as well.
Yeah.
Okay, what other discussion do we want to have? And so, you know, we need to, in thinking about what we're going to do here with this particular house, because we've not done this with any other houses. Okay? So and that's why I asked for the streetscape. If you put this house next to the house that's next to it, the first floor is on the first floor when you walk in the door, correct?
No, the
Okay.
garage.
So one of the things that we need to consider is that if we're going to change this in some way, that we're going to set a precedent for what we might do with other houses. So I'm just saying you need to think about that in terms of how you want to look at this, because you're asking for this first floor to be 18 feet above grade?
No. Above mean sea level.
Right,
Sorry.
above mean sea level.
Above mean sea level, sorry.
Yeah.
Above mean sea level, right. And there are not any, are there any other houses out there in this development that are, the first floor is 18 feet above sea level?
Yes. Lot 1, which is in the VE zone, was,
Well, that's not an approved plan even. And that has a different flood zone.
right. But the requirements of that flood zone will require it to be at the same floor height as this one. When it's shown all the way to the right, if you want to scroll over.
So I don't understand when you say the flood level requires this house to do that, when the requirement is saying that it needs to be, if I'm understanding what you're saying, Matt, that it needs to be 10 foot, is that right?
Correct. With 10 foot above sea level.
Right. And you're wanting to put it 18 foot above sea level.
So 10 foot to be underneath of the floor joist. So we've got a 14-inch floor joist.
Well, underneath the ductwork, if you have any.
So,
Right.
you know,
So
so
2
at
more.
least,
Yeah. So it could be 2 feet, it could be either 10 or
least
12
12
feet to the first floor by requirement.
at minimum 12 foot. And then lot 1, if you want to scroll all the way over to the right,
That's not,
We-
it's not an approved plan.
but it's showing the height at which that one would be, which is the same height as this one.
So the answer is there's
But
not
that's-
another house that's there that has the first floor to this level.
There are other projects, like the townhouses on the circle have this same
That's not the
situation.
question I'm asking you, though.
No, they don't.
So there's not another house in this particular area of town, and this little project here that has all of these houses that we made this special kind of plan for. There's-
Actually, Queens Point has the same situation, because all their parking is underneath.
Okay, but
and
that's
the
not what I'm
first-
talking about. Okay.
That's next door.
Do what?
Queens Point is next door, and they're,
I know it's next door, but that's not what I'm discussing right now. I'm talking about this project where we have all of these houses on these very small lots.
You mean River Station?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's what I'm talking about. There's not another house in River Station, in this project area, that has a first floor that tall.
I do have a point of clarification.
Yeah.
So the current approved houses and constructed houses are on off waterfront, facing the river. Would be the first proposal for on the river?
No.
no. So the only difference in this house is that on the waterfront, the first floor is, you've got the garage underneath. And so you've got to go through, get to the garage on the water side.
That's my point. It would be
Yeah.
the first house to be constructed at whatever is proposed that would be going on that alley, on that side.
Yes.
Which the topography, if you know that area is higher than the street where they're going in on the other alley.
Yeah.
So my point is that topography-wise, if you have a 47-foot high house on this side of the street and a 47, this side of the street is going to sit higher because of topography.
And that's why when I did these elevations, I adjusted the foot difference so that it would kind of even out. But yeah, it would be the first one. Lot 1 would also be similar to this when that's brought. Queens Point has the same situation. The townhouses on the circle have the same situation where the parking is underneath and the first floor above grade is a full story above grade. So it's not uncommon. It's just we haven't done it in this development yet.
So Lot 5 has been approved, Matt?
Yes.
I don't remember the.
Yes.
Is that a 2 or
Yeah.
3-story house?
Yeah,
It's a
not far.
3-story house.
And there's a garage on the back, it just happens to be on the first floor, so to speak?
Half of the first floor is a garage.
Got it.
The back half, right, yeah. And that's pretty much the case for all of them?
This is the first one we've brought where they didn't want all that extra square footage on the first floor. And, yeah. Which to me, it makes it look like a 2-story house instead of the 3-story house, like the other ones had to be.
Well, when we're talking about intent, it sounds to me like the intent of what was written is to keep the houses, as it reads, is at a certain height. So for it to be, I think you said 10 or 12 foot high for the maximum for the
Correct.
first floor, that's the intent of how that is written.
If it were a house to be elevated.
As the attorney had pointed out, that, that reading it directly, if it were to be elevated.
Well,
So, I mean, just to be fair, we may need to address this in the updates guidelines work group, because all this aside, there are several other vacant lots throughout the historic district that could very well end up with a house 17 feet higher than it is required to be, just because they want to. Who knows?
I mean, my question would be,
But-
does it look out of place in the streetscape? Is it,
well, it certainly, if you look at the house beside it, it looks different than that house. Not that you can't have differences, but it's certainly clear that the first floor of the house you're proposing is very different than the first floor of the house beside you. And that's why I asked the question about in this project here, there are no other houses that have the first floor this high.
and that's why I brought you photos of other houses downtown along the.
Well, I understand that, but that's not
Yeah.
what I'm talking about. I'm talking about in this specific
Yeah,
project here, in this specific group of houses, which is why I asked you to bring the streetscape. It doesn't go along with the rest of the streetscape in terms of where the first floor is. It does in terms of what you're talking about, height, because it has that opportunity, although the ones across the street are lower.
Are lot 13, 14, and 16 approved?
they're all approved. The only one not built is 13.
So they look 2-story.
Yeah, they are 2-story with just a portion of the back being the garage. So this house is more similar to those, in fact.
Is there some reason why you can't lower the first floor?
So it's a design issue. So yes, obviously you can lower the first floor. It just means that then you have a 3-story house. So in this regard, they didn't want all that square footage. They wanted a 2-story house, but in order to get parking underneath, you've got to have an area for parking. And if you're not going to put square footage on the area where there's parking, like I've done in the other ones, they only wanted 2 stories. They didn't want 3 stories. And so this is how we solved that problem. I mean, to me, the 2-story house is, I don't know, to me it fits in. Actually, lot 5, that we're going to go back to a different design. I just found that out. So I'm going to bring that one back that has a little bit lower roof to it. But
So does the house next to it not have a garage underneath it?
yes, it does. It
Okay.
just has half of the back
The
portion
back
as
is the garage.
and the front half as living space. But that then requires you to have 2 additional floors to really get in the master bedroom, bathroom,
Right.
kitchen. And so in solving that problem, we took out some of the square footage and just made it 2 stories above parking.
So I wonder at this point if somehow or another we need to gather more information about,
Just call the question.
as you talked about this ordinance and this request, if we need to gather more information about that before we decide on something.
Can we not just call the question?
I'm not sure what information you'd be needing.
Well, I was thinking that the information to look at is what to do about this situation, because it doesn't go along with that.
The only
Madam
thing,
Chair?
Madam Chair, we could do is change the law.
Madam
Do you
Chair,
think that
just
we
call
could
the
do
question?
Could you,
Madam Chairman, can we just call the question? I think that I would be interested to see what everybody has to, what a motion might produce in this situation.
Matt, can you scroll back to the conditions again? I think that's what they were. There were 2.
Not conditions,
Or
just 2
motions.
options.
Yeah,
2
thank you.
options. Yeah. Can you, I should make it bigger since we're sharing.
Do your conditions go away with the interpretations, the legal interpretation of what the intent of the height guideline was?
Right, it's either, we were suggesting either go with bullet 1 or go with bullet 2.
So bullet 1 has to do with the perceived, if that's the right word, code interpretation.
Right.
Number 2 is aesthetic. Is that, am I reading that
No,
correctly?
number 2 is, so essentially it's the choice between whether or not you believe that the guideline does apply to this case, then that would be bullet 1. If the guideline does not apply to this case, that would be bullet 2. That's just, and there's probably nuances in between, but those would be 2 clear options.
Okay, so I do have a question, and this is for the commission, and maybe I'm out of order here. If I am, tell me out, because I'm new. Is the opposition based on the code, or is it the aesthetic of the fact that you've got a second floor entry, so to speak? That's the question I've got. Because I understand why it's listed that way and why they want it that way. I got that. Is the issue the code? Is it, or is it the second floor?
I also want to tag on to you, John. If we were trying to fit a square peg into a round hole here, I really feel like that then we need a code for new construction. We have a code for elevating existing structure, but we don't have one for new. And so we either continue until we have codes that apply to this case, or we have to make a judgment based on what we have. That's kind of where we are.
We do have guidelines for infill construction. The 3.4 is infill construction, and so that's the new construction. All the other guidelines essentially were built for existing structures, but you use them to apply when you're doing new construction. But we have guidelines for infill construction, and that's what this is.
Were they talking specifically?
And, you know, in that way, to me, that's bringing that entry level similar to other houses, you know, on the street. You know, not having it be tall, you know, much taller or out of proportion in the height of it. And I think that, you know, it is a different animal, but, you know, we try to do those things in order to make it kind of fit in those guidelines and make it acceptable.
So the two options that you all were suggesting was to either continue this, to deal with this issue of this guideline, or to accept it and fix the two windows.
So the continuing is,
Right.
would be to allow them to revise the design to
Right.
accommodate the interpretation that the guideline does apply to this case.
Right.
If you pick one, we will have to revise the design to include a first floor at the garage level. Correct? And if you approve two, then, you know, we'll change the windows to square and it can stay as it is.
Well, that's why I asked the question about, is there some way for you to lower the first floor?
I mean, you
And
know.
have more ceiling on the first floor, but not necessarily have three floors?
So, you know, I have a client who asked us to design something in this manner that was acceptable to the guidelines. And so that's what I have done my best to do in interpreting the guidelines for entries, for height, for scale and mass. You know, that to me, it meets those guidelines for what that, you know, for what that house is. So can I make it all one floor inside? Sure. I mean, I can do whatever they want me to do, but this is what they have tasked me with doing, and it's my job to take the guidelines and interpret them and give them to you in a design.
And our job is to interpret our guidelines as well, and that was why I was trying to find some place in between, dealing with what we have in terms of the guideline to...
I personally don't think, and listening to the attorney again, you know, state the matter-of-factness of the wording, I don't think it applies to this project.
So I would like to add that in that vein of finding a common ground between the two is I think she's done that with the design in the fact that she didn't need to extend the siding down as far as she did. Nowhere does it say that she has to do that. And that makes a big difference. She added the landing in the stairs because she realized it was going to be 17 feet of stairs coming straight down from that second floor, essentially, all the way down to the sidewalk. And by breaking that up at what would visually perhaps be a first floor is then also somewhat helpful. So I think worst case scenario, which is something we don't want to have happen, is she could have ended up with 11 feet of foundation brick there and a stairway all the way down to the ground. So I think maybe she's found a compromise position with the design.
And might I add, Madam Chair, it appears to me, in listening to the conversation, that the members are grappling with what is it, 4.1.5 means. We know what it says, but we're trying to figure out what it means. And it may be that you need to ruminate, that you need to read, research, maybe go back to past minutes, whatever you have to do to understand what that language means. And it may be that this setting at this time is not conducive to doing that. So it may be, not trying to add additional bullet points, but so that everybody can feel comfortable with applying this guideline as it should be applied, you could continue consideration for the approval or denial of this COA to your next regularly scheduled meeting. You can inform yourself about how to interpret that particular guideline and then resume the conversation once you've had an opportunity to really think carefully about how to apply that particular guideline.
And we could discuss it then at the intervening work session as just a commission discussion item.
Okay, we could bring up this topic and put that on the agenda for the next work session. Okay. Well, so if we wanted to do what your suggestion, we would need a motion to, in a sense, the first option here, to continue the application.
You would need a motion to continue the application to a date and time and place certain. And I think Mr. Blackwater has a comment.
For a specific reason.
For a specific reason, yes.
For a
ma'am.
specific reason, which would be to rectify to meet the requirements of guideline 4.1.5.
No.
Not necessarily.
To understand, to better, for all the members of the commission to better understand the requirements of 4.1.5.
That would be our reason for doing it.
Yes.
Okay. Does somebody want to?
Yeah, I've got, just for clarification, one more stupid question.
Excuse me, John, go ahead.
I'm sorry? So if we, for whatever reason, however this happens, and we do approve this design, and later we interpret this differently, have we set precedent not only in that neighborhood for them to come back and say, well, you approved that lot?
That's certainly, I think the question is directed at me. I think that's certainly an argument that a later property owner or applicant could make. We also have to balance that with, if this commission were to deny any COA, not talking about this one specifically, you would have to articulate an objective standard by which this application fails to meet our guidelines. And in making that declaration, it needs to be well-grounded in fact and law. So there's a tension between those two notions, making sure that you set an appropriate precedent and also applying the facts and law as they exist in this moment correctly. And that may take some additional deliberation.
And that could be much more clearly stated if we could just see a drawing of possible houses at this level and then one house at the level you were proposing. If we could see what it looks like when it comes together.
Isn't that what we've been looking at, Peggy?
I did that. That's in there. You mean the elevation of the street?
Yeah, I don't mean a whole house. I mean, this is the house line at the current, and this is the one that Ruth is concerned about. If we could just see, here goes this one, and here's this one. And does it look that bad?
Well, that's what I showed up there, and I don't think it looks bad at all. I mean, I think that I've done it so that it looks like it is in line with all the other houses, and that was my point, was that this guideline is for elevating houses. It's not for new construction. I've designed this so that it looks like the floor level is lower so that it's compatible with the other houses around. And so I don't think it, when I look at it, I don't think it appears out of place or ridiculous. All the houses across the street are 2-story. The one next to it, I'm going to bring back differently than this, and it will be 2.5-story. So I don't know. I think that, to me, this is a better scenario for these houses on this side of the street, just like the problem was solved on Edgerton. This is the same problem that exists on Edgerton, where you're driving in underneath and then they've got 2 stories of house above. This is the exact same scenario. It's just that the front facade does not have a garage entry in it like those do. It has a rear garage entry, so the front facade needs to look more like the streetscape. But it's solving the same problem of parking underneath the house with 2 stories above.
So before, when we were in the situation of this new land over there, and you know that we had to take some time to figure out how to accommodate these houses that were going to have garages attached to them. And we had to take a month or so to actually write a whole another section, which my esteemed colleague here wrote a section to accommodate these houses as you wanted to build them. So perhaps this would be another time and another situation that we have come up with these houses. Could we not take a month for
Absolutely. And I'm not saying don't. You know, you were about to make a motion. I'm not saying don't do that.
So I'm just saying, could we not take a month to gather more information and everybody be comfortable with what decision they want to make about this? Because this house doesn't have to start to be in construction in the next several months, does it?
They would, but no, it doesn't.
Okay. So could we have a motion to do, as our esteemed lawyer suggested, to continue this application for 1 month? So we need to put the date, the time, and that would be November the 17th at 5:30 in the second floor courtroom of City Hall to, did you say gather more information?
To gather more information to inform the discussion and decision-making as it relates to this application.
Okay. Would somebody be willing to make a motion for that?
Interesting. Can you put up south elevation, please?
Mm-hmm.
While we're thinking.
Oh, that's it there.
Must be the other side then.
Oh, the north? You want the front to the left or the right?
The front to the right.
Okay, go up. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. All right. You need more? Okay.
I mean, we can bring the front door to that. I know that that's what you're thinking. I just didn't want to do it.
Okay.
I mean, that was the other solution, is that you can bring the front door to above where I've got that landing.
You just put the steps inside the house?
Yeah.
And put the steps inside the house,
There's already steps there.
you know, and that would then
So
be.
you're in an unfortunate predicament from my point of view. I happen to agree with you on the interpretation of the guideline,
Yeah,
but I also happen to agree that the front door is levitating up in the air.
okay.
And so it's kind of making it difficult for me to participate in a meaningful way.
Yeah, yeah, that was the other part of the.
So
how do you
if
do
you could
this?
find that front door enclosure down somewhere where everybody's been talking about, I bet you'll leave here tonight with some paperwork.
I mean, it's possible to do, and I looked at doing that, to bring the, because then you would have heated
And it may be
space.
complicated enough, we don't want to just talk about it. You may
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
actually
yeah. I'd have to bring it
experiment a
back.
little bit before.
Anyway, but,
So you're okay with the 30 days? You're okay with the November 17th?
I mean, you know, I think that you all are gonna require that, and that's fine. You know, I mean, these people are
Yeah.
actually ready to go, but
You
will
know
a
what I
month kill
say.
it? No, they won't, it won't, so.
I always say, help me, help you.
Yep, so,
So could we have a motion
So you don't.
for a continuance of this to the next meeting, in which we can become familiar with that guideline, and perhaps you could bring us something else that would help us be more comfortable?
Unless you want to make that a condition, that we bring the front door down to where the landing is, then that would solve your problem.
Can't find my paper.
He's getting ready to make a motion, I think.
Are you really willing to do that, though? You think that's a good?
I don't think it, I mean, it's up to you guys. I think, I looked at doing that. That was part of running through this whole design process. And in the end, the stairs were complicated enough, I put it up in the air. It just seemed to make more sense. But the truth of it is, you can have a front door there. It means you wouldn't have much of a front porch necessarily, but I might be able to, I'd have to
You might surprise yourself.
change it around a little bit. I was trying to get the front porch.
Yeah,
Okay, we have a motion
I
on
move
it.
that we continue the application for
Okay.
810 East Front Street to November 17, I believe.
17?
Yes.
At City Hall at 5:30 PM in the courtroom to allow us to gather more information on interpretation of guidelines as it relates to the application, and also to allow the applicant to explore an idea that has just recently been exposed.
I was always back there.
Is that in the right format?
Absolutely, it was
Right
perfect.
format,
It was
okay.
perfect. I
All those
second
in favor say aye.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none. We will continue this till November the 17th.
I really do appreciate you all working with us. I
Well-
mean, you all have been more than generous, so I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
And so we need to be sure and put this on the agenda for the next
That's right.
design
It'll
review.
be right behind
Okay,
you.
and have her come back to the design review
Yes.
with her renditions of whatever she's going to be doing differently.
Potential alternative proposals.
Yes, her alternative proposal, okay? All right, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Okay, all right.
All right. Well, to a certain extent, I apologize for opening that can of worms, but I think
Need to be talked about.
in the end,
Yes, because this is going to come up again, so, and that's why I said we need to be careful what we do here, because it's going to come up again. So we need to be sure we know what we're doing.
I really feel like that we need specific guidelines for new construction.
We do have specific guidelines.
It's saying as long as it's congruous with the infill around it, which it is, but we're still pointing out areas that aren't clear in our guidelines.
Let's move on.
Well, this is a new guideline that wasn't,
Well, Peggy, I'd like to have a moment, so and I'm part of the commission, and I feel like that right now we've got holes, and this is why we're dealing with interpretation, because we don't have that language yet. Just my thoughts.
okay. All right, so old business, we still don't have none? We still have none? We still have none for old business? We don't have any public left, so we have no comments from them. We need to take up the calendar, which you all have a draft of, I think. Does everybody have a copy of that? Do you have a copy of the draft? Calendar, does everybody have a copy of the draft for us to approve this for next year?
I have it on the screen too.
It has it on the screen as well. So he has design review and official meeting for each month except for December. And we don't have a December meeting this year either, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So, does anybody have a discussion that they need to make about that? Okay. We need to have a
Well,
motion, right, to adopt
To
it?
be fair, you all just got it like an hour before, or even at your desk. So if you want to take a few minutes or whatever to, but I checked all of the dates to see if there was any holiday on any of those days, and there are none. Now, November 16th, I don't believe is even the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, so I believe that would be the following week. So that would be the only one that would be even close to a holiday. The July 4th, obviously, is 2 days before July 6th.
Yep.
So that would be a Monday. Since the 6th is Wednesday. So.
Can we need a motion to pass this, right?
Well, so you don't have to pass it until the November meeting, but if you are ready to pass it this evening, go for it. And that way people can begin planning for next year, even including January and February that we wouldn't otherwise necessarily
Okay.
plan for.
I move that we adopt the 2022 schedule as proposed.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have several seconds. Choose one. All of those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, hearing none, the motion passed.
Excellent.
Okay, so that's the calendar. So number 8 is the administrator's report, and here's the report on, goes to the back page on majors and amendments that were done. Number 1 and 2 on East Front Street, and the minors. Here are the minors that, are these things that you've already done?
Yes,
Okay,
those were just
so you
recent.
got some of this taken care of. Good for you.
Yep, those 14 were done in the past month.
Okay, all righty. So those are all done. Number B, report on the COA extensions issued since the prior regular meeting. There are none. Are there any other items or updates? Do we have any groups that groups is the right word, right?
Yes.
Groups, not committees, groups, that we need to meet. I can make a report that the awards committee will have met by the time we have our next meeting, and I'll have a report then. I'll get together with the 2 other organizations, and we will have a meeting and give you a report. So that's one of the groups that we've got. Do any of the other groups, chairpersons, head persons, whatever they're called in the group,
No,
does
we-
anyone have a report? I see.
We have no report that I'm aware.
No reports, okay? Do I hear a motion for us to adjourn?
So moved, so moved.
Okay, we have a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye, okay?
It's an enthusiastic second.
It will pass, I don't hear any nays. We are adjourned.